Hello again, 7th graders. This video is for Wednesday, April 15th, and this is a day when you'll be looking through your assignment sheet for the dramatic monologue. And I wanted to read through that. You're not, of course, required to finish a great deal of work on that or anything today, but the main thing is I want to make sure that you've gone through it all, kind of seen the scope of work and what you'll be accomplishing and how long you'll be accomplishing it, that kind of thing. At the end of next week there on Thursday is when we'll be turning this in. It's a creative and a fun assignment. We looked yesterday at the idea of a dramatic monologue, its purpose, what kind of special meaning is involved with it, how we're able to bring across that meaning or channel that meaning through very unique characters. And today, we're thinking especially about how maybe even you can use the voice of your character to make a point with which you disagree. Or in one sense, I guess we could say you're using their voice to make a point that you disagree. But your reader, your audience might pick up on that and still wrestle with those issues and arrive at a point with which you may agree. If that still sounds a little confusing, that's all right. We're going to an example of it, and I'll kind of explain this through the poem Invictus. Now, Invictus is a very famous, well-known poem, not a perfect example of a dramatic monologue. And the reason why is we don't know this particular character. We don't have a poem beforehand or a story outside of this where we know this person very well. However, actually, the background of this particular author in some ways supplies that kind of a story. William Ernest Henley is the name here of the author. He actually lost his father at a young age. He was 12 years old when his father died. He had a condition, Henley did, known as tubercular arthritis. And he actually lost one of his legs for that reason, had to be amputated. A pretty drastic surgery saved the other leg, and he had to recover for a very long time. In fact, that is when he began writing a lot of his poetry and where this poem came from. He did go on actually to a pretty successful, though very difficult life, involved in publishing and in the print world and things like that. So this is his poem, Invictus. You'll see my eyes move over here because I have the poem up in front of me on a different screen. But it says, "Out of the night that covers me, black is the pit from pole to pole. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." And there is Invictus, a strong, powerful kind of poem that grabs a hold of us with language that is very confident, brash, we might even say. Even at the very beginning, you can see how there is an artistic kind of sense applied to knowledge, right? The author at the beginning is kind of saying, well, I don't really know about all these gods necessarily. Whatever gods may be, I want to be sure to thank them. And it's kind of a way of saying, God, whoever God may be, certainly as a Scot, William Ernest Henley is from Scotland. He would know very well, of course, the God of the Bible in terms of his culture around him, the teaching around him, what people would be aware of. He might think for a minute about these pagan gods of the ancient world, Roman and Greek gods, or different things like this, and he just kind of wants to say, whatever gods may be. Often when they think about pain or the problem of evil, people can easily say, well, can these gods really exist if we go through this kind of pain? And so it's his kind of way of saying, what I know is my own unconquerable soul. That's what I truly know. And there may be some gods out there who gave it to me. Well, I'll be sure to give them thanks. But it's really, in some sense, his unconquerable soul that he's actually worshiping in a way. It's almost like practically his soul has become, in that sense, rather godlike for him. That's what he's really worshiping, what he's writing a poem to here. Not the one true and living God, or even any other kinds of gods who may exist according to his first stanza. And yet he also shows this kind of blackness of night covering him. So what I want you to know is to notice here is the way in which it feels like in the course of the poem, right, that he is setting himself up as someone who just kind of, as it were, turning his shoulder, seeing you and seeing me, and addressing us as his hearer. In that sense, it is a monologue. It's very dramatic because it goes over the top. We don't know his character all that much, but it is really, really kind of powerfully done in presenting through whoever this is a particular perspective on life. Right? He goes on to say, I haven't winced. I've been in the clutches of circumstance here. Clutches, of course, is referring to the way that a hawk or an eagle would come down and grab its prey in its clutches. But he's basically saying, but I didn't cry. How do we take this? Is this impressive? Is it powerful? Or is it weak in one way? In some sense, it's a little bit like the little child who says, well, you know, I was getting punished with a spanking or something like that, but I didn't cry. And I managed to show him by not crying. Well, has he really somehow showed circumstance or showed the god or gods, whoever may exist, that he had in his first stanza? Is he really showing anyone up? Is he really somehow conquering by means of just not crying? By means of just showing how I don't care? And then he says, under the bludgeonings, you know, these powerful blows of chance. My head is bloody. I've taken the blows. You can see it all over me. I'm not somehow claiming that I've not borne the physical pain, but my head is unbowed. In other words, I'm not kind of laying down like this. I'm still standing up straight with a bloody head. And he says, beyond this particular place, all of these years, which will be a menace. So he's not somehow saying, out there things are going to get better. He's saying all the menace of years, these things are probably going to get worse. But they find right now, and they shall find me unafraid. On the one hand, it's a great accomplishment to be unafraid. On the other hand, we can say, is it just an accomplishment all by itself? Is it merely an accomplishment if we just avoid fear at what we call to be a menace or something nasty coming at us? And then he says, it doesn't matter how straight the gate, a way even of referring or alluding to the scripture. Remember, we did our unit on allusion earlier this year. You'll know that Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says, broad is the way and wide is the gate that leads to destruction. And he says, narrow is the way, hard is the road that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Well, here, Henley uses some of the language of straight, but he then applies it to the gate. And then he uses some of the language from the book of Revelation. How charged with punishments the scroll. Does the kind of scroll or the book of my life have a lot of punishments or something like that? And he's basically kind of saying, it doesn't matter. I've shown that I can handle punishment. And then he says, I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. How do we take this? You know, and in that way, he's accomplished something great in this poem because he kind of forces us to pause. He kind of forces us away from quick answers, and we do kind of ponder it with him. There's a lot to be said about facing the future unafraid. Even if we believe that future is a grim future, a sad future full of pain, there's a lot to be said for having a kind of inner strength to accomplish those things. And yet, this is ultimately a very unbiblical, unchristian view of things, and I would say unrealistic view. I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. Technically, he didn't quite contradict his first stanza because he says that the god or gods, whatever gods may be, gave him his unconquerable soul, and now he's the captain of it. But still, if you didn't give yourself your own soul, in what sense are you truly the captain of it? He got awfully close there to contradicting himself. Is he truly the master of his fate that way? Also, does he truly know that he can handle every punishment, right? It's interesting that Jesus himself in the scriptures says, do not fear the one who can destroy the body, but afterwards cannot destroy the soul, but rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. And we might say to Henley, he certainly endured a great deal. Tubercular arthritis, the loss of his leg. But then again, there's a whole lot else that he didn't lose throughout the part of his life when he's writing this poem. Things can get a lot worse. And does it really help somehow to claim as if you're God, being the master of your fate, the captain of your soul. So this is the way in which a dramatic monologue can be so interesting, because it doesn't present to us just ideas. It presents to us ideas packaged in a person. And it's like here as we come to encounter Henley, William Ernest Henley, through his poem Invictus. We find a lot here that can be analyzed but set aside. But also in some sense, we're just sitting with him for a while and seeing life through him for a while. We're considering his perspective in that way, even if it certainly is not something that we would put forward and just decide we need to imitate this. The way forward is to tell ourselves that we're master, that we're captain of our fate, and that kind of thing. He does bring out at least some points. He does, through his dramatic monologue, remind us of one characteristic that's important in him, and that is important for us, though it shouldn't be pushed too far, which is appropriate fortitude, strength, a willingness to push on through pain, and a willingness to accept the fact that the years that come may bring a lot of difficulty with them. And so that is another example of dramatic monologue. And in this case, one that does have some excellent redeeming qualities, some important things to see, but where the voice overall does present a bit of a mistaken idea, perhaps. So you need to be aware that when you write your dramatic monologue, you certainly can pick a character from Arthurian legend and have that character speak about virtue and vice in a way where you think that his or her voice may be a good voice for representing certain mistaken ideas, even though there might be some redeeming qualities in them, and some interesting ideas, and some ways in which you find it so fascinating from that particular character. You still know that your reader will be able to pick up on the idea that it is mistaken and learn in some ways the opposite true lesson. So that is Invictus, and another idea for us going forward. Pray the Lord's blessings to you as you continue on this day in your studies.